When somebody in the mainstream media or a politician or just somebody who could care less about the Second Amendment uses a term like assault weapon or gun violence or mass shooter, it's probably just expected. It's something that you would think that these people would say because the mainstream media is pushing an agenda to help the politicians who are trying to divide us so they can control us. And the person who's uninterested in the Second Amendment might even own guns, but they don't care about liberty or freedom. They're ignorant. And ignorance isn't the same thing as stupidity. Ignorance is a choice. A lot of people just plain choose to be ignorant. And it's unfortunate because the Second Amendment is something that is somewhat unique about America, and it is the most important amendment, not because my guns are my toys and I can't live without them. I get so sick of people in our culture talking like that, and they totally miss the importance of the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment is there to protect us from the threat of a tyrannical government, as a deterrent to a tyrannical government, as well as to protect us from all enemies, foreign and domestic. And if we're in the Second Amendment culture, if we claim to be in the Second Amendment culture, then when we use the same terms as the people who want to take away our liberties, or the same terms as the people who don't care about all of our liberties, we are helping them to erode at those liberties. We are helping them to, little by little, take away our freedom. Now, I can understand if you're doing something like this video where you're talking about it from an instructional point of view. That's all this is. I do not agree with these terms. I think they're inaccurate, they're made up, and they're misleading. Once again, it feeds right back into the people who choose to be ignorant, and they're the most easily misled. But our culture is better than that. We know better than to use these terms when we're talking about the Second Amendment, when we're talking about anti-gun legislation, when we're talking about a high-profile crime that we know they're going to be using to push their agenda, to be pushing some unconstitutional law. So think about it like this. Gun violence isn't a real thing. It's violence committed with a firearm, or it's a crime committed with a firearm. Now that's a lot more wordy. So maybe you're just lazy, you're complacent, and you just say gun violence because the other side says gun violence. But guns don't get up and just commit violence on their own. If I was going to describe gun violence, I guess I would say if you took a hammer to a gun, that would be gun violence, because why would you commit an act of violence against that firearm, right? But people have to retrain themselves if they want to start being more accurate in their statements and saying a crime committed with a firearm. Mass shooter is a bunch of us, law-abiding gun guys, Second Amendment culture people, all right, going down to the range at the same time and shooting. That's a mass shooting. It's a mass murder, because the thing is, that murder could be committed with poison gas or fire or explosives or a vehicle and kill the same number of people, but they wouldn't call it a mass a mass car accident, a mass poisoning, a mass arson. No, they wouldn't. They would call it a crime. They would call it a tragedy, but it's really an atrocity. And if you give credibility to mass shooter, you're feeding right into their narrative. Assault weapon? It's not an assault weapon. That's a made-up term. You might go, well, assault weapon, assault rifle, they're interchangeable. Actually, no, they're not. An assault rifle is a real thing. Assault weapon's a made-up term. Assault rifle, that term was created by Adolf Hitler. Sturmgewehr. It's a real thing. It's a shoulder-fired rifle or intermediate length cartridge, long gun with selective fire that's fed by a detachable magazine, a detachable feeding device. Your AR-15 is not an assault rifle. Well, AR, that's what it stands for, assault rifle. No, it stands for Armalite rifle. the Armalite division of the Fairchild Aircraft and Engine Company. So don't feed into it. These lies, these errors, these made-up terms have been repeated over and over and over decades, to the point where people actually believe they're real. They believe this stuff, and it isn't true. And it's difficult to reach ignorant people. It's difficult to deal with ignorant people. But the one way we can push back against their ignorance and push back against the lies that are being told about you and I is with the truth. So assault weapon is a made-up term. Assault rifle is a real term. And by the way, it's not illegal to own an assault rifle. It's an NFA item. If you want to pay the money and go through the trouble, you can own one. It's going to be expensive, but you can legally, lawfully own one. But your semi-automatic rifle that shares those other characteristics with the assault rifle, but doesn't have the selective fire capability, is not an assault rifle. And an assault rifle is not an assault weapon. They're not interchangeable terms. Language is important. So all I'm asking is for some of you to think before you speak. Think about how they've used these terms against us, and think about how much credibility you give those same terms when you're using them, when you're talking about our right to keep and bear arms. Thanks for listening.